You are probably watching this with headphones on right now. Genuinely, millions of people wear them for hours every single day, and if you are sitting at a desk gaming or just listening to music, they feel entirely harmless. Maybe you even sleep with them on, but here's something that nobody tells you. Under the right conditions, those headphones are doing more than just delivering sound. They are physically altering your skeleton, not just pressing down your hair, structurally, permanently shifting the bone of your skull. And right now, for an entire generation of people, this process is already underway. This is the story of Wolff's Law, a biological mechanism most people have never heard of, a rule of human anatomy that your body cannot negotiate with, and a physical reality that is arriving for heavy tech users faster than almost anyone expected. But to understand why, you first need to understand what your skull actually is. And to understand why your headphones are reshaping your head, you first need to understand how human bone works. Because most people think the skeleton is like a rock, a solid, unyielding frame that stops changing once you become an adult. It's not. Not exactly. Your bones are alive. They are highly dynamic, living tissue constantly breaking themselves down and rebuilding themselves. Every single day, microscopic cells called osteoclasts dissolve old bone, while cells called osteoblasts build new bone in its place. That's the process your body depends on to heal fractures and stay strong. Without this constant remodeling, your skeleton would become brittle and snap. This is why astronauts lose bone density in space. In zero gravity, the bones don't feel any weight. The body assumes the bone isn't needed anymore, and the rebuilding process slows right down. You lose mass. You feel weaker when you return to Earth because, in a very real sense, your skeleton has adapted to the lack of stress. Your body responds to mechanical force constantly, just from moving around, walking, and lifting things. And scientists found a way to define exactly how this system adapts. It's called Wolff's Law. Most people have never even heard of it. Anatomists have understood this rule for over a century. It is almost comically simple. Bone in a healthy person will adapt to the loads under which it is placed. If you apply constant pressure or weight to a bone, the tissue remodels itself to become thicker and stronger along that line of stress. But the opposite is also true. If you apply a sustained, unnatural clamping force to a specific, localized area of a bone, the tissue will slowly yield and remodel around that pressure. And this biological rule, Wolff's Law, is arguably one of the most important anatomical realities that most people have never even heard of, because it doesn't just tell you how bones heal. It tells you how your body yields to its environment. It tells you whether your skeleton will hold its shape or warp. And there is a specific amount of sustained force beyond which the human skull simply begins to adapt. So what is that force, and what does it actually mean for your body? Clamping force. That is the threshold. Above a certain amount of sustained pressure, the biology stops working to maintain your original shape. Your skull is relatively thin at the top and sides. For your headphones to stay on your head, they require tension, a literal spring-loaded clamp pushing inward against the temporal and parietal bones of your skull for hours on end. At a high enough clamping force, the pressure against the skin, muscle, and eventually the bone itself becomes a constant mechanical stressor. Your body keeps generating new bone. It keeps trying to maintain its structure, but the persistent, localized pressure triggers a remodeling response. The bone slowly begins to yield, and unlike evolutionary adaptations that take thousands of years, this change is happening in real time. Indentations, depressions, eventually a palpable groove in the skull. And this is where the modern headset comes in. For a 1-hour commute, a headset is harmless. The pressure is temporary. The tissue rebounds. That's the whole point of padding. But when the usage rises above a few hours to 8, 10, or 12 hours a day, the padding stops protecting your structure and starts acting as a constant, focused point of contact. It is now a biological vice clamped to your head. You are essentially force molding your anatomy. The headset is now an orthodontic brace, but for your cranium. Add heavy, noise-canceling components to that continuous clamping force, and you have a worst-case scenario. The bone is already being signaled to adapt. The extra weight just increases the rate at which the skull yields to the pressure. Under those conditions, taking them off for a few hours does not save your structure. It just momentarily pauses the process that is altering you. This is not a theoretical concern. This is documented. Now, here's the part that should genuinely alarm you. Medical professionals believed until fairly recently that a sustained cosmetic alteration of the adult skull from consumer electronics was essentially impossible. Something to worry about in science fiction, a threshold humanity had not yet crossed. They were wrong. Dermatologists and doctors are increasingly analyzing a phenomenon casually referred to as the gamer dent. While much of the initial depression is soft tissue and fat being pushed aside, sustained, multi-year use is beginning to show evidence of mild bone remodeling in extreme cases. These events aren't happening over centuries. They are happening over years, and they are happening more frequently than anyone predicted. Streamers in 2023 began shaving their heads for charity, only to reveal physical, visible channels carved into the top of their scalps. Conditions that sit at the absolute edge of normal anatomical wear and tear. People live like this. People wear them constantly, and each year the frequency of extreme prolonged headset use increases. A generation of young adults, many of whom work from home, many of whom game for hours every night, are projecting a continuous mechanical load onto their skulls. This isn't a distant problem, it's an arriving one. But here's the catch. The visible dent is actually the optimistic scenario. Now here's the thing about the clamping force. It represents localized pressure on the superficial layers. But beneath that bone is a complex network of cranial nerves and blood vessels. Constant pressure doesn't just remodel bone, it restricts blood flow. It compresses the nerves running along your scalp, leading to tension, headaches, neuralgias, and chronic fatigue. The reason that a heavy headset can cause lasting damage isn't because headphones are inherently dangerous. It's because the conditions in which we use them, bound to screens for a dozen hours a day, are conditions that now exist as a standard way of life. Conditions that are becoming more and more common, and conditions that most people have no framework for understanding because almost nobody talks about Wolff's Law. We talk about screen time, we talk about blue light glasses, posture, and warnings to stretch our backs. But the actual physical limit, the rule that tells you whether your skeleton is currently being warped by the plastic you wear, rarely makes the news. Continuous mechanical stress, that's the wall. Below it, your body rebounds. Above it, no amount of padding, no ergonomic design, nothing changes the outcome. The biology has closed the door. The bone will change. And the honest, uncomfortable truth is this. Millions of people are already touching that wall. More people will reach it. And they have no way to stop it because avoiding headphones for the modern worker or student isn't an option. But next time you sit down at your desk, and right now you probably are, and you reach for that headset, now you know what it is actually doing and why sometimes the thing you put on to escape the world is the exact thing leaving a permanent mark on you.